So the other day at the Dragon Quest 35th anniversary stream, we got a ton of announcements for new games releasing for the series in the future. We got a confirmation of a Dragon Quest III remake in the style of Octopath Traveler, which looks amazing and is something I definitely plan on talking about in the future. We also got to look at Dragon Quest Treasures, which seems to be a prequel focusing on Aerith from Dragon Quest XI. But what I want to talk about today is the final trailer that got shown, which is Dragon Quest XII Flames of Fate. And while we didn't get a look at what the game actually looks like, we did get some pretty good information from the series creator that I really want to talk about. Because you already know that even though we didn't get a ton of information, we got a pretty good amount of info of what the game is shaping up to be and what they want to do with it. And honestly, if the game ends up being similar to what was talked about in that presentation, this game might have the potential to be the best Dragon Quest game yet. So with that being said, let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is how Yuji Horii said this game would be darker than previous Dragon Quest games. And you can kind of tell in the trailer because the whole thing looked like it was in some sort of hellscape in some sort of barren wasteland. And honestly, I kind of like that. I'll start by saying I've only played Dragon Quest 9, 11, and a little bit of 8, but what I liked about those is that it started off with you going on a grand adventure through an unknown world. There were always some consistencies throughout it, like you're always going to encounter slimes and similar enemies in Dragon Quest games. But other than that, every game was a new, lighthearted experience filled with new places to explore and new characters to meet and travel with. But with Dragon Quest 12, it would be nice if the tone was a little darker, and it seems like that's what we'll get because according to the series creator, they're aiming for a Dragon Quest for adults sort of thing, which honestly has me really excited. Maybe this time we could take a Breath of the Wild or Avatar route and play as the protagonist after the world is already destroyed or close to being destroyed. Then it will be our job to travel across the world picking up companions along the way to go and fix it. I think having that become the basis for the story would be a great way to switch up the Dragon Quest formula and truly separate it from previous games in a good way. Not to say that any of the previous stories are bad, I think they've done really well for themselves, but I think diving into possibly deeper and darker stories like the meaning of life, as they said in the reveal trailer, would be a great way to start expanding on what Dragon Quest is. Because I've always enjoyed the adventures I've gone on with the games that I've played, and in those games we've always gotten to more mature themes, but I wouldn't necessarily call them mature games. And while that's fine, I still had a fun time with them, I think something those games could have benefited from is a story that ended up going a little further and a little darker maybe in the style of games like Nier. Because one reason games like Nier Automata and Nier Replicant do so well and have these great stories is because they're ready and willing to snatch away that happy ending at any point in time or make things more bittersweet than anything, like what happened in Ending D and Nier Replicant. And that feeling of not getting the happy ending and ending the game with a bittersweet taste is a feeling that leaves a lasting impact in a good way. And if it's done right, it could even end up being better than what ends up happening if you just end with everyone being happy and running off into the sunset. And it sounds like we might end up getting a story like that because during the interview, the series creator said we might end up having some choices that affect the story of the game. And in my opinion, having multiple endings or multiple routes to go to is something that is always welcome to me. Because not only does it add a ton of replay value as you go through and try to get different endings, especially if they have different requirements for all of them, but it means that we might end up having, some moral choice to make. Because from my experience, a choice that ends up altering the story in some way to merit a different ending usually revolves around some moral choice. In Persona 5, it was choosing to accept or refuse Igor's deal, and in Nier Replicant, you either have to kill the final boss or let them live. And depending on which option you choose, you get different endings based on those scenarios. And having the story get to the point of having multiple choices to result in different endings makes me interested in not only the choices themselves, what could actually lead up to it. And I could be looking into it way too much, but honestly, that's kind of where I am. Because I'm genuinely excited to see what Dragon Quest XII has to offer and how they end up changing the Dragon Quest formula. Because not only did they say the story is going to be a little bit darker, they also said they plan on revamping the combat for Dragon Quest XII as well, to make it more different than the combat that's been in the series prior. And if you're not familiar with Dragon Quest, the combat has always been pretty standard turn-based combat. And while that formula is fun, I feel like having a different combat style for a game that seems like it could be tonally different from previous Dragon Quest games would be a good way to go. Maybe it could change up the style to something like Persona 5 that has turn-based combat but with little quirks in it that make it more stylistic, like things like the Once More or Baton Pass system. Between these two options though, I would rather see them do something in the style of Final Fantasy VII Remake, because it's different enough to where it's real-time combat, but there are certain elements like the ATB system, or when it slows down when you're cycling through the menu, that makes you feel the traces of a turn-based combat system. And honestly, I think a Dragon Quest game with real-time combat would be freaking amazing. Even though it's always had turn-based combat, even when I got into some of the older titles, Dragon Quest to me has always been a game that would be better suited with real-time combat. And while the turn-based combat is fine, it didn't necessarily take me out of it or anything, I really feel like Dragon Quest would be better with some form of real-time combat. Maybe it could be like the Ni no Kuni games, where you go through the overworld and when you run into enemies, it takes the form of an arena where you still have the world around you but the battle takes place within some defined space. Either way, even though we might not see this game for a long time, and it could change dramatically between now and when we actually see the game, I just wanted to get my thoughts out on this and what we could see in the future. Honestly, even if it just ends up being little changes here and there, it'll be fine because I've always loved Dragon Quest since I was a kid and the main games have pretty much delivered every time I play them. But if Dragon Quest XII does go the route that they're talking about, I do think it has the potential to become one of the best Dragon Quest games we've ever seen. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? Are you excited for Dragon Quest XII? Because if you've seen my reaction, you already know that I am. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you leave a like and subscribe for more content. But that's going to be all from me today, so this is Moose Wayne, signing off.